On a cold afternoon, 16-year-old Emma sat on a bench, nibbling the last sandwich she could afford that week. When she saw a frail homeless man watching her from a distance, she quietly walked over and gave him half. He looked at her with tears in his eyes, but before Emma could return to her seat, a black limo screeched to a halt beside her. The door swung open. What happened next made everyone nearby freeze in disbelief. Emma Williams never liked the spotlight. She moved through the world quietly, blending into the scenery of her bustling high school. At 16, she had the kind of face you might pass a dozen times in the hallway without noticing. Pale skin, brown hair, always tied back loosely, eyes downcast, backpack worn from years of use. She never complained, never asked for help, and certainly never spoke of how hard things had become at home. Her father had died in a construction accident 2 years ago. It left Emma and her mother struggling to breathe under the weight of bills, grief, and an empty refrigerator. Her mother, Janet, worked 2 part-time jobs, one as a cleaner, the other sorting packages in a freezing warehouse. But when chronic illness began to take its toll, even those meager jobs became difficult to maintain. Medical bills started stacking up like bricks in a wall they couldn't climb. They didn't qualify for much assistance. Emma had learned to go without new clothes, without Wi-Fi, without a social life, and most days without food. Her lunch today, a single peanut butter sandwich wrapped in reused foil, was a small miracle. Her mom had apologized for not having jam to go with it. Emma had hugged her and said it was perfect. Now she sat alone on a bench in Jefferson Park, a quiet corner a few blocks from her school. The wind was sharp today. She tugged her sweater tighter around her thin frame, unwrapped the sandwich slowly, and took a small bite. It wasn't much, but it was something. Her stomach ached from hunger, but she chewed slowly to make it last. She became aware of someone nearby. Across the path, sitting against a cement trash bin, was a man. His coat was torn, his hands visibly shaking, and his face hidden beneath a thick beard. He was watching her, though he tried to look away whenever she met his gaze. Emma glanced down at her sandwich, then back at the man. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. She hesitated. This was all she had until dinner, and lately dinner wasn't guaranteed. But she stood up anyway. Walking quietly, she tore the sandwich neatly in half and held the bigger piece toward him. "I have plenty," she lied softly. The man looked up in surprise, eyes rimmed red and sunken deep into his face. His hands trembled as he accepted the sandwich. "Thank you, miss. God bless you. You didn't have to." Emma offered a gentle smile. "It's okay. I hope it helps." He nodded, swallowing back tears, and bit into it slowly, savoring every crumb. She turned to walk back to her bench, but before she reached it, a loud screech made her jump. A sleek black limousine pulled to a stop along the curb, its engine purring like a beast. Tinted windows, shiny chrome. It didn't belong in this part of town. She froze. The homeless man looked equally confused, his sandwich paused mid-bite. The front door of the limo opened, and out stepped a man in a dark suit and sunglasses. He moved with sharp purpose, eyes scanning the park, until they landed on Emma. Then he walked straight toward her. "Miss, may I have a word?" "Me?" "Yes, you. My employer saw what you just did. He asked me to speak with you." She instinctively took a step back. "Why? Who is your employer?" Before the man could answer, the back window of the limo began to roll down, slowly, suspensefully. Inside sat a silver-haired man in an expensive black suit, posture perfectly straight. He looked like he belonged on a magazine cover or a political stage. But his eyes were full of something else. Not judgment, not arrogance. They were wet, glimmering. "I saw you give that man your food," he said softly. "You didn't know anyone was watching. That's what made it beautiful." Emma's heart pounded. "You have a kind soul.
In this world, that's rare, and I believe kindness should be rewarded. The limo door swung open. Emma shook her head. Wait, I don't understand. Who are you? Why are you... The driver pulled out a phone. We know who you are, Miss Emma Williams. We know about your mother, about the bills, the eviction notices, the illness. Emma's stomach dropped. What? How do you... The man inside the limo leaned forward. Because your mother saved my life many years ago. She doesn't remember, but I do. Emma stood frozen, heart pounding in her ears. Please, he said, get in. There's something I must show you, something that will change both your lives. The park seemed to grow quiet around her, even the wind stilled. She turned slowly to look at the homeless man, who was now watching her with an expression of wonder. He nodded once, as if giving silent permission. Emma took a shaky breath and stepped toward the limo.
The moment Emma stepped inside the limo, her world changed. The air inside was warm, perfumed with a subtle citrus scent. Soft leather seats, glossy panels, and dim ambient lighting made it feel like another dimension, far from the cracked ceiling of her tiny apartment or the rust-stained sink where her mother washed dishes. She sat gingerly across from the silver-haired man who had spoken through the window. He was watching her, not with the cold calculation of a rich man used to buying everything, but with a kind of awe, like she was something sacred. I'm sorry for frightening you, he began, his voice calm but weighted with emotion. Let me introduce myself. My name is Martin Hale. Emma blinked. The name echoed faintly in her memory. Martin Hale. Wasn't he the billionaire who owned Hale Industries? A face that had once graced newspapers and business magazines, always in connection with something big, oil deals, hospital grants, political donations. I don't understand, she said, her voice still shaky. Why would someone like you know who I am? Martin folded his hands and leaned forward. Because I owe your mother my life. Emma stared, confused. He continued. 21 years ago, long before I had money or power, I was just another man trying to survive in a brutal world. I was homeless, addicted, lost. I was sleeping behind a gas station in Chicago during a snowstorm, slowly dying from pneumonia. Emma listened, eyes wide. I was hallucinating, coughing blood, barely able to move, he said, pausing as if reliving it. People walked by and ignored me. Some even laughed. But one woman stopped. She didn't look wealthy, just a young woman with a medical student badge and a warm scarf. Emma's heartbeat picked up. She didn't hesitate. She took off her scarf and wrapped it around me, called an ambulance, sat with me in the snow while I coughed into her sleeve. I didn't even know her name, but she saved me. He pulled out a thin, creased photo from his coat pocket and handed it to Emma. It was her mother, younger, smiling, arms wrapped around a patient in a hospital gown. Martin. Emma gasped. She was volunteering as a nursing student. Her name tag said Janet, Martin said softly. That night changed everything for me. I got clean, got help, got my life together. He looked at Emma with tears in his eyes now. And I never found her again. Until today. Emma pressed the photo to her chest, stunned. We've been looking for her quietly for over a year, Martin explained. We found out she left nursing school to care for her father, got pregnant, married, then your father died, and she never finished. She disappeared into survival mode. Emma's lip trembled. That's all true. Martin reached into a folder beside him and pulled out a series of documents. Medical bills, eviction notices, unpaid utility statements, all with her mother's name. We bought out the debt this morning. Your landlord won't be calling again. The hospital has been instructed to treat her immediately, no charges. Emma covered her mouth with her hands. This can't be real. It is,
he nodded. "Because what you did today proved something to me." She looked at him, confused. "You gave your only food to a man who had nothing, just like your mother did for me. That kind of compassion, it doesn't come from wealth or education. It's in your blood." Emma's eyes welled with tears. "But I don't need charity," she said softly. "This isn't charity," he replied. "This is repayment and an opportunity." He handed her a new envelope. Inside, a full scholarship to any university of her choosing, all expenses paid, tuition, housing, food, everything. "And if you'd rather work," he added, "I have a position at my foundation. You'll help design programs for youth experiencing homelessness and food insecurity. Your voice matters more than any CEO's." Emma was speechless. Then came a quiet knock on the limo window. The driver opened the door. Outside stood the same homeless man she had fed earlier. The man looked nervous. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said. I saw her go in, and I wanted to say thank you again. No one's been kind to me in a long time." Martin looked out at the man with a strange softness. "What's your name, sir?" he asked. "Tom," he said quietly. Martin turned to Emma. "Do you trust me?" She nodded, still dazed. He gestured. "Invite him in." Emma stepped out and said, "Tom, would you like to sit with us?" Tom was stunned. You, really?" Within minutes, Tom was sitting inside the limo, a bottle of water in one hand and a sandwich in the other. Emma watched as Martin listened to him talk, really listen. Not just about his hunger, but his story. How he'd once worked construction, had a family, lost it all after a worksite injury and a pile of medical bills. Martin leaned over to Emma and whispered, "We're going to help him, just like your mom helped me." Emma sat back, overwhelmed with emotion. And for the first time in years, she felt full. Not from food, but from hope.
Emma stood frozen as the limo drove her through the upscale district of the city, a place she'd only ever seen in magazines, with glass buildings taller than her dreams and sidewalks that didn't have cracks. She glanced at her reflection in the window. Baggy hoodie, tired eyes, hands clenched tight in her lap. She didn't belong here, and yet everything was moving because of her. She hadn't even meant to do anything heroic. She just shared her sandwich. That was it. Now the richest man in the city was telling her he owed his life to her mother and offering Emma a future she could never have imagined. The car pulled up to a towering structure with a golden sign, Hail Global Foundation. The doors were opened for her. People in suits nodded respectfully as she passed. A woman escorted her to the 23rd floor, straight to a private glass room where Martin Hale stood waiting with a thin envelope in his hand. Emma entered hesitantly. "I'm sorry if this is too much," Martin said, gesturing for her to sit. "But there's something I didn't share yesterday. I needed to confirm it first. And now, I believe you deserve to know the full truth." He placed the envelope in front of her. Emma opened it slowly. Inside were copies of old medical records, legal documents, and a birth certificate. Her mother's name, her name, but the father's name was blank. Martin tapped a page gently. 21 years ago, I told you your mother saved my life, but what I didn't say is that I wasn't alone that night in the alley. There was someone else with me." Emma looked up, her heart starting to race. "I had a younger brother," he said, his voice tightening. "Half-brother, actually. His name was Caleb. He was different from me, wilder, angrier. He left home young, fell into the streets. That night, when I collapsed from pneumonia, he disappeared. I assumed he ran or overdosed, but I searched for years and never found him." He leaned in closer. "Until yesterday." Emma's eyes widened. Martin turned and opened the door. In walked Tom, the same homeless man Emma had given half her sandwich to, cleaner now, shaved, wearing fresh clothes, and walking with dignity. But his eyes were the same, full of pain, and something else, recognition.
Emma stood slowly. "What is this?" she whispered. Tom took a step forward, trembling slightly. "Emma, my name isn't Tom. It's Caleb Hale." Emma staggered back a step. Martin nodded. "He's my brother. The man your mother helped that night wasn't me. It was him. She carried me into the hospital and left him behind to make the call. That's why I never saw her again, and why she never knew my name." Emma stared at Caleb. "Why didn't you say anything yesterday?" "I didn't know you were her daughter, not until I saw your photo on the foundation wall this morning. You have her eyes." Emma sat down, shaken to her core. Caleb continued, voice cracking. "After that night, I was arrested for theft. I served time, lost everything. When I got out, I tried to find her. I kept thinking about the woman who gave me warmth in the middle of winter. I never forgot her." He reached into his jacket pocket and handed Emma a photograph, old, tattered, folded at the edges. It showed a younger version of her mother, smiling beside a man on a hospital bed. "Caleb, I was too ashamed to come back, so I stayed in the shadows. And yesterday, you showed me kindness without knowing anything about me, just like your mother did." Her heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Martin stepped forward. "You gave a broken man something this city hasn't given him in 2 decades, human dignity. And that's why I want to ask you something important." Emma tried to steady her breath. "Ask me what?" "We're launching a new global initiative. For real, long-term homeless reintegration. I want you to lead it, with Caleb by your side." Emma blinked. "Me? But I'm just a—" "No, you're exactly what this world needs. You know how it feels to have nothing. You know how to give even when you don't have. That's power." The room went silent. Martin looked at his brother, then back at Emma. "And one more thing." He turned and brought out a folder. Inside was an old DNA report, dated, verified. Emma's name. Caleb's name. The results? 99.97% match. Emma stared at it. "No!" Martin nodded gently. "He's not just a man you helped." Caleb's voice broke. "I'm your father, Emma. I didn't know. God, I didn't know you existed until this morning." Emma stepped back, her knees weak. Caleb dropped to one knee, not with pride, not to beg, but as a man who had fallen too many times in life and now stood before the one thing he thought he'd lost forever. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. But I want you to know, I'm here now."
For 2 full minutes, Emma didn't speak. The room stood still, Martin Hale watching carefully, Caleb still kneeling with eyes full of both hope and guilt, and the city skyline behind them shimmering in the afternoon light. She looked down at the DNA report. Her fingers trembled. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why, after all this time?" Caleb slowly stood, but didn't move any closer. "Because I didn't know. Not until yesterday. I lived in the shadows, Emma. I was ashamed of what I'd become. I didn't think I'd deserve to find anyone again. But when I saw you share your sandwich with me, something in me broke. You looked at me the same way your mother did all those years ago, and I knew, I felt, you were hers." Emma blinked back tears. "You were 5 feet away from me, starving. I didn't know I was feeding my own father." "You were," Caleb said, voice cracking. "And you didn't flinch. You didn't judge me. You gave with love." Martin stepped forward, his tone more businesslike, but his eyes gentle. "I've seen thousands of people in my career, but what I saw in you, Emma, that day in the park, that quiet choice to give when no one was watching, that was something even money can't fake. You showed character, and now you've inspired something bigger than yourself." He opened his sleek presentation folder and handed it to her. It contained the blueprint for a citywide initiative, the Emma Project. a fully funded program to provide food, shelter, mental health care, and job training for the homeless, designed with input from real survivors like Caleb. I want you to be the face of it, not because it'll look good, but because it's real. Your story will open doors we can't. She stared at it. Her picture, taken from the park surveillance camera, was on the cover, her hand outstretched, giving half a sandwich to Caleb. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," she said quietly. Her mother, standing now, with the support of a nurse in the doorway, interrupted gently. "You are, sweetheart. You always were. You were the reason I got up every morning, even when it hurt." Emma turned to her mom, seeing her for the first time not as someone broken, but as someone who'd carried a strength no one had acknowledged. Janet walked in slowly, looked at Caleb, really looked at him, and her expression changed from confusion to a glimmer of something deeper. "I thought you were dead," she whispered to him. "I cried for you for years. I was dead, until your daughter brought me back." She wiped her eyes and whispered, "She's got your fire, and your stubborn heart." The silence between them wasn't empty, it was healing. Emma felt a weight she'd carried her whole life, the weight of being forgotten, overlooked, barely surviving, begin to melt, not because someone gave her money, not because a billionaire stepped in, but because someone finally saw her heart, and saw her worth. She took a deep breath. "I don't want a spotlight, but I'll lead this, if it means helping others like him, like us." Martin nodded. "That's all I needed to hear." The months that followed were unlike anything Emma had imagined. She was featured on morning shows and news outlets, but she never chased attention. Instead, she walked the streets she used to avoid, handing out warm meals, listening to stories, and hugging people others crossed the street to avoid. Under the Emma Project, over 200 homeless individuals found permanent housing in the first 3 months. Dozens were employed in the new urban garden programs, and several were reunited with families they hadn't seen in years. Caleb became a central figure in the project, not as a symbol of failure, but of redemption. He stood beside Emma at every press conference, not as her father in title, but in effort. It took time, but slowly Emma allowed him back in, not because he was perfect, but because he chose to stay. One night, as they stood under the city's lights after another successful fundraiser, Caleb turned to Emma. "Do you regret giving that sandwich away?" he asked with a smile. Emma shook her head. "No," she said. "It was the best thing I ever gave." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "You didn't just feed me that day. You saved me." Moral of the story: sometimes the smallest act of kindness can trigger a chain reaction that changes lives. What you give in quiet moments, without expecting anything, may return to you in ways far greater than you can imagine. Kindness is not weakness. It is legacy.